Exodus chapter 20. We're going to be talking about the 10 Commandments, and we're only going to cover 5 this evening just because we like doing things at a snail's pace. I'm just kidding, that's just kind of how I do it. But Exodus chapter 20. So just before we get into this, I just want to remind you guys, next week we're not meeting, but the following week we're going to pick up, and you don't want to miss because it's the second. You know, you can't have one set of commandments without the other. So anyway, so last week's teaching, we learned that the context of chapter 19 was mainly found in verse 5 when Israel was camped by the mountain of Sinai. The Lord said to them, "Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine." In verse 6 he says, "And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel." And obviously he was talking to Moses to relay that onto the children of Israel. And if you remember, after that, when Moses did relay it, the children of Israel, they responded all together, "All that the Lord has spoken, we will do." And that's without even receiving the law or the commands from God. They were thinking, hey, God delivered us out of Egypt. He has provided for us. We have seen victory over the Egyptians and the Amalekites. Sure, whatever God has to say, we will do it. But now in chapter 20, this is where God begins to speak to them concerning his commands upon their lives. In order that in keeping these commands, their lives would be miserable, and that through that miserable life, they can earn their way into heaven. No, that's not at all what it is. He gave these laws, these commands, so that they would be a people that would be set apart from the world. In other words, a holy people, that when other people see how they are living and how their God is with them, those who are watching, they would want this for their lives as well. They would want their God to be their God. So rather than continuing living a life that is fashioned by the world and sin and darkness. So now God begins to lay out his commands in Exodus chapter 20, verse 1, and it says, "And God spoke all these words saying," now real quick, that's an important little verse here, okay? A lot of times as we study the Bible, we always see that the law that was given to Moses is referred to as the law of Moses. However, its origin was not from Moses, but from God. God gave it to Moses, and Moses then gave it to the children of Israel. And so it is known as God's law, or the law of God. And if you look in Deuteronomy chapter 9, verses 9 through 10, you would see that the origin was clearly from God. Here in verse 1, in Exodus chapter 20, Moses wrote that God spoke all these words to him. But then when you go into Deuteronomy, he writes, "Then the Lord delivered to me 2 tablets of stone written with the finger of God, and on them were all the words which the Lord had spoken to you on the mountain from the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly." So therefore, he spoke to Moses, and Moses therefore relayed the message to the children of Israel. So the origin of the law came from God. It's God's law. So back to verse 1. God spoke all these words saying, verse 2, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage." So God begins with what he had done for them in their current history, where he delivered them from the bondage of Egypt. So he was really relaying that, hey, I'm your Savior, where his work of deliverance was finished. So he's not telling them, I'm giving you this law that you may merit salvation. I already saved you. Nor to merit my kingdom, because you are already my children. He says, in light of saving you and what I have done for you and freeing you from your slavery, delivering you out of the bondage and oppression, a life that was miserable and was being destroyed, I now give you my commandments for you to keep as your proper response to the one who saved you, which is a picture of how we are to walk in the Lord. This is like the image that is given to us in 1 John chapter 4, verse 10. It says, in this love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us. Right? We know that God loved us first. So our proper response to God is our love for him, for what he has done for us, and by keeping his commands. He saved us from the bondage of our Egypt and our slavery to sin, and delivered us out of our old condition in the world. Jesus said in John 14 verses 15, he says, if you love me, keep my commandments. So our expression of love for our Lord Jesus is through our obedience to him. So now when I read his commandments in the Bible and from the mouth of Jesus, I don't look at them as rules or look at them begrudgingly, but rather I look to obey them as a response of thanksgiving and love to my Lord. And that's exactly how we are to respond to him. Now think about everything that he's already done in your lives and what he is doing even now in your lives. And knowing that all that he will be doing in your walk with him in your future. So our proper response to him is to live a life in obedience, showing our love for him and thankfulness for him. The thing is that he can say, we can say we love Jesus all the time. We can say that easily with our words. But if you notice, Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commandments. So it's our expression of obedience that shows our Lord that we love him. And that is the image here. As God is giving his 10 commandments, he reminds them of all that he has done for them so that they may properly respond to him in obedience. Now the Lord declares his first commandment, saying in verse 3, he says, you shall have no other gods before me. Which means there are to be no other gods except him in his presence. Now some people look at this and interpret it as, well, I can worship many things in my life just as long as God is number one in my life. Right? All the other things come secondary to him, where I can spend a lot of time on these other things, but hey, he is number one in my life, and God is good with that. But that's not what God is saying here. He is saying there shall be no other gods, as in zero in your life, that will be worshipped in my presence. The thing about the children of Israel is no matter how bad their relationship with God had gotten, where they were walking away from him, they never were going to deny the Lord, no matter how bad it got. Or they were never going to say, we'll never follow him anymore. The problem with the children and the danger of the children of Israel was they would continue to worship God in his name, but their lives would practically become very much like the world, where they would worship different things and gods that were being worshipped by the world around them. And that was the danger that they would fall into ultimately, because it led them into captivity under the Assyrians and the Babylonians in order to break them from their idolatry. That's God allowed that to happen, which was the worship of anything other than the true God. Now, there are only two camps in all of the universe that people would fall into when it comes to worship. They will either worship the Creator or the creation. And by doing this, it means to worship anything that is the master passion of my life. But if I worship anything other than the Creator, our God of the Bible, is to engage in idolatry, because it is to worship the creation, which is infinitely less than God, by virtue that it was a created thing. Now, Jesus said to this religious lawyer in Matthew chapter 22, verse 34, when the lawyer asked him a question, basically he was testing him and asked Jesus, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment," and it so happens to be the first commandment we're looking at now. It does not say to split your heart, soul, and mind with other things. Put God at 70%, and whatever it is that you can devote the rest of your time to, give that 30%. Or God gets 60%, but man, that 40% is going to be spent on the TV because I need to catch up and binge watch the latest episodes of Andy Griffith. Or give God 50% and your work or your relationship that you're in the other 50%. Anything lower, a percentage of God, is not making him number one. And sometimes people like to skid around that 50%. But the point Jesus makes is that there is no love arrangement in our relationship with God. According to God's word, it is not acceptable both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. We are to worship the Lord our God supremely with everything that is within us, our whole being. There's to be no other gods in our lives in God's presence. Then he says in his second commandment, verse 4, you shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above. So they were not to make any carved images that represented God to worship, like a statue, something handheld. They were not to make any statue of anything that is in heaven above, like the angels. Back then, there were people who would worship angels, or the birds. They had different kind of, or the sun god. We saw that in Egypt, or the moon, or the stars. And then he says, or that is in the earth beneath, meaning of the animals, or they would have like half animals and half human, whatever the case may be, or some sort of image of man that's kind of distorted. He said, or that is in the water under the earth. So any fish gods or frogs or anything that is in the water. Verse 5, he says, you shall not bow down to them nor serve them. So again, no idolatry. 0. There's not to be some physical image of something that is carved out of hands that we would come down and bow down as an expression of worship to that God. The Bible teaches that our God is spirit. Even when Jesus was talking to the Samaritan woman at the well, he tells her in John chapter 4, verse 24, that God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. Not a carved image or something. God is seeking those who worship him in spirit. You cannot present God as a spirit by a physical carven thing. And there's no need to do it. But it's also impossible to do it because he is spirit. Maybe the false gods you can do something. You can bring a little carved image, but not the God that we serve. So there's not to be any localizing of God in a thing that we have made with our hands, because first of all, it doesn't represent him at all. And second, you could find yourself developing a relationship with this man-made thing and cease to have a relationship with God. We don't need it. We have a relationship with God through the Holy Spirit. This is how intimate it is for us. We worship God in spirit and truth. In communion with God, there's no need for any relics when we have him as close to us as in our hearts. But what happens typically when people begin to worship these man-made things, or even going to a particular location thinking this place is holier than another place, usually indicates that there is something wrong in their relationship with the Lord, because they are losing a sense of intimacy with him through the Holy Spirit. And so now they are trying to work up this relationship, or trying to remember this relationship they once had before when they went to a particular place to worship God. There's not to be any carven images, big or small, in the worship of the Lord. And here's why. It says, if you look back down, it says, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. It's pretty interesting to see that our God is a jealous God. But in the New Testament, we who are believers in Christ are known as the bride of Christ. Oh, that makes sense. We are betrothed to Christ. We belong to him. We're not married yet, but we have drank the cup of the new covenant in his blood to be with him forever. When he calls, his father goes, hey, go get your bride. Then he takes us home with him, and we attend the marriage supper feast of the Lamb. Right now, we have been set aside completely to him, betrothed, as we wait for the Father to tell the bridegroom, come get him. Now, in the Old Testament, the imagery there was that God was the husband and Israel was the wife. And so when Israel would engage in idolatry, God viewed it as spiritual adultery. The same way as it would be for a human being if they had been betrayed that way in marriage, which is a deep betrayal, a betrayal that brings deep pain. So yeah, God is a jealous God. Thing is, sometimes we need to be reminded about this, is God is very serious about you. He's very committed to you. He's very faithful to you, and he will never leave you. He is always with you and wants to be a part of your daily life. Now, can you imagine the creator of the heavens and the earth wants this kind of relationship with you and me? And he makes himself vulnerable to my faithfulness to him. And he does that in order to give me a chance to show my faithfulness to him, that it may bless him. Our God is a jealous God, and I'm good with that. Then he said, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. So there's this realization that as a father and mother would begin to engage in idolatry, that the potential for the next generation to follow their parents' footsteps in idolatry eventually would become haters of God as a result of that. And then it would cycle on down from generation to generation until maybe someone would find the Lord and begin to walk with him and create a new history for the family. And we see this a lot in the Old Testament concerning the kings. You know, you would have this one king that would be raised up, and he would be an evil king. And then after him, there would be another evil king. And then there's another evil king. But then, you know, there's this one good king that comes up who would want to serve the Lord. And he would throw off the cycle of their family history. And God gives us the Spirit to do that, right? So when this happens, he shows mercy to those who obey him. So you got two different walks of life. He says in verse 6, but showing mercies to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. Obey, and you'll be shown mercy. And I love the sound of that. Now for his third commandment, verse 7, he says, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. The Lord's name was never to be taken in vain. No one in a court of law was to say, I swear to God, right? I swear on the name of the Lord, my testimony is true. Or to make a vow to someone, I swear in God's name that I will do this. I will pay you in 2 weeks. But then they failed to pay their vow. It also includes the unholy, casual use of his name, like something we hear, oh my God, or oh God, oh Lord, where they're not saying it to God, but they're aiming it towards the situation as a slang term. But it is to use his name in vain, and this is something that needs to be avoided. His name is to be used reverently. It wasn't to be used in that way. God says, look, I take notice of it. And if you look at the verse, he says, I will not hold him guiltless, meaning he holds you guilty for using his name in vain. Then the fourth commandment he declares in verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath day of the Lord your God. So God establishes the keeping of the Sabbath day and making it a holy day. And it is the seventh day, which is a Saturday. And this was a covenant that God had made with the children of Israel. It is the only one of the 10 commandments that is not reinforced and commanded of us as some form, in some form or another. It wasn't commanded to us to keep it in the New Testament. As Christians, we are not under the Sabbath law. And it is declared in the book of Hebrews that all of this was a type or a shadow of Jesus that was to come, and the Sabbath represented rest to the children of Israel. It was a physical rest, but it was speaking of a spiritual rest to come. When the Messiah came, Jesus has come, and we have received Jesus into our lives, and now we are in a peaceful relationship with God. We are at rest spiritually with God. This spoke of Jesus and the rest that he would bring to our lives. And so the Sabbath was fulfilled for us in Christ. Jesus came not to destroy the law, but he came to what? Fulfill the law of Moses. And he has fulfilled the Sabbath for us. So it was to be a holy day of rest. And in the Bible, holiness means it is to be different and set apart from any other of the 6 days. And here is how it is to be different. He says back in verse 10, in it you shall do not work, or you do no work. You, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. So this day was to be taken off per week for rest. This law wasn't to be broken, nor for someone to be forced to break it. You know, like a dad would come in, the head of the household, and say, hey, good morning. Today's the Sabbath. I'm not working today. But there's money to be made, so male servants get out there and get to work. No, he was not allowed to do that. This was for everyone to obey, and that day was to be off and set apart, holy and filled with rest. And God knows, there's wisdom in this because he created us. He knows how we function. He knows that we are not to be in fifth gear 7 days a week. Because what will happen? We will burn out, we'll break down quickly. So we are to stop, draw close to the Lord, and meditate on him. Then notice how the Sabbath is modeled after himself. God gives us this image. He says in verse 11, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. Now, on a side note, if you look at this, for those who try to figure out Genesis chapter 1, if God in creation did all this in 6 days, or was it done in like ages or thousands of years, because God is eternal and is not bound by time, and their head starts to get bigger and swelling and bigger and trying to figure this out. Well, here is God's commentary, all right, of what he did. He says, for in 6 days, not 6 day ages, in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. So resting the seventh day, there's the model. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. He made it holy and set that day apart from the rest. Then he moves on to the fifth commandment, which to me is interesting because the first commandments of the 10 has to do with our relationship. The first 4 had to do with our relationship with God, which is our vertical relationship, right, with him. And now then he moves on, giving us the next 6 commandments that have to do with our horizontal relationships with our fellow man. And this is done in that order for a reason. God begins with our vertical relationship with him before our horizontal relationship with our fellow man. And here's why. No person can truly be in a right relationship with their fellow man until they are in a right relationship with God. Let me say that again. No person can truly be in a right relationship with their fellow man until they are in a right relationship with God. It's only when our vertical relationship is right that our horizontal can be right. And what's interesting as well is that it's this image that brings forth the cross. That's why when the lawyer came to Jesus, asking him, what is the greatest commandment? Jesus said this. Now pay attention. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now verse 40 says, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Jesus would fulfill the law and prophecy by hanging on the cross at Calvary. This is an imagery of Jesus fulfilling that law. And it is clear, it's right before our eyes, and it's very beautiful. And I love that. So now the fifth commandment, verse 12. It says, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. The word honor means to treat with respect and to treat with honor. So the children are to respect their parents. They are to obey them and submit to their authority. But notice what I think is just how great our God is. Notice that the Lord begins right precisely after the relationship with Him in His first four commandments. He goes to the family unit. This is for the protection of the family unit, where the Lord is the cornerstone, but the next block is the family. When these two are in place, it affects everything else. It is the building block of society. When God is center of our lives as parents, and then it is brought into the family unit, and if all units live this way as people of God, it creates a society that reflects the image of God's love and faithfulness and holiness. So God established the authority structure at the home right off the get-go. Parents are parents, children are children. As the parents submit to God's authority in their lives, the kids are to follow by submitting to their parents' authority, because to disrespect parental authority would introduce rebellion and disunity into the family, threatening to destroy the family's ability or stability and of society as a whole. And I think it's so important, and the way God does this, that the responsibility as parents also, we are the first front lines in our relationship with the Lord. And what God does in our lives reflects into our children's lives. They're going to see what we do. They're going to watch everything we do, and they're going to follow suit with it. Some of them may try to find their way. I mean, once they hit teens, they think they know everything, but there's this other part where it gets brought back down to the real world, and that they're seeing a true reflection of Jesus in the parents' life. So it's really amazing what God does here, just even in the Ten Commandments. But God gives a promise to the children who honor their father and mother. He says, honor them so that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. Honor them so your life may be long. You ever notice when a young person lives in rebellion towards their parents, they also tend to easily rebel against God and His Word. And because of this, as they rebel, they're living in sin. They choose that life to run with sin. But what does sin do? Sin seeks to destroy and kill. So as they're chasing this, sin wants to shorten their life. And God says, hey, if you honor your parents and the Lord, God says your days may be long upon the land. And I would even go even further, not even on the land, but life eternal when you obey the Lord. And I think it's such a good promise from the Lord, as our Lord is always good. But it's a good reminder for us as parents. Just stand fast. Continue walking strong in the Lord. Keep following His direction, and it doesn't just affect your kids, it affects everyone around you. And if you see, as He prepared the children of Israel, He was preparing them to be a people that are set apart, as God has called us to be a people who are set apart. And set apart is the definition of being holy. Amen. Let's pray. Lord, we